For more, we're joined by French journalist, author, and filmmaker Rokhaya Diallo. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you for inviting me.
This year, there's really the feeling that there's a lot of attention on International Women's Day, more than in the past. That's my personal feeling. Is it yours as well?
I can't tell, but I have to say that it's very encouraging to see so many people on the Place de la République, especially because a few months ago in November there was another march for women against violence that was attended by a big crowd of women, and especially women from the younger generation. So that means that it's now an issue, a topic that you cannot ignore anymore.
A topic you can't ignore anymore. And if you think back of what's happened over the past year in this country, new laws against harassment that have come into force, talk of even an extension of the statute of limitation for sexual crimes, more women coming forth and reporting crimes to police. Is it because of the Me Too movement that started in the U.S.?
I'm sure it had an effect, having so many women telling about what they have been exposed as women regarding sexual harassment. I think that it had an effect because many people would say that the women's, the way women speak is now liberated. I would say that it's the way we hear them that is different. Like now we believe them, and I think that to women who are used to be silent, to remain silent about what happened to them, seeing like big celebrities telling about that a very powerful woman have been attacking them, allows them to say, okay, I'm fine, I can tell about it, and maybe people will believe me.
Is there a French way of, I mean, the theme is universal. Harassment, gender inequality, that's universal. But is there a French way of looking at this problem that you've noticed?
I'm sure you've heard about the column that was signed by 100 of women against the Me Too movement, which is very specific to France. It was signed by...
the right to be pestered.
Yes.
Including the actress Catherine Deneuve.
Exactly. So that's something that is very specific to France. And I was kind of surprised to see that, and to see that there is this idea in France that there is a certain way of living, which includes galanterie and, the way, this seductive way, attitude that is... people think that men have a certain attitude that is related to the French culture, and to me it's just the acceptance, a general acceptance of a kind of harassment that is not accepted in other countries. So I think that we have trouble maybe pointing out people, names, naming people, because nobody has been really in trouble because of the Me Too movement in France. And in the U.S. we heard about men who have attacked women in France. It didn't have many consequences.
We thought 8 years ago, when there was the Dominique Strauss-Kahn affair, that, this is a watershed moment. Nothing will ever be the same again in France. But it took that second wind, didn't it, with the Me Too movement?
Maybe I have to remind you that Dominique Strauss-Kahn was arrested in the U.S. It wasn't arrested in France. Women have been tackling the fact that he was a sexual offender before, and I have to remind you the name of Tristan Banon, who has been made fun of before Dominique Strauss-Kahn was arrested in the U.S. for attacking Nafissatou Diallo. So it was a moment in France. It was really the start of something, but we still have a long way to go.
The last few days, we have seen people speaking out at Africa's most prominent international film festival, the FESPACO. The actress Nadège Diagne, who started the hashtag Memepaspeur, not even scared. And she was denouncing two sexual aggressions that happened to her over the years in the film industry in Africa. Do you think there'll be traction for something like that on the African continent?
I think it was the start of something. Nadège Diagne was very brave because she decided not to go online to tell about what happened to her, but she went to tell about it in the middle of a festival. So she named the offender, and it had direct consequences, because a series that was directed by one of the directors was in competition in the FESPACO, and it was was planned to be broadcast on TV5 Monde, and the channel decided to cancel it. So that means that it had a direct impact. And being in the middle of a crowd that is related to the cinema and naming someone is something that doesn't really happen. It didn't happen in the Festival de Cannes. It didn't happen here in France in the César. So to me, there is something very special that is happening on the African continent.
Because we've seen a Me Too effect in Europe. We've talked about France. We've seen it in India. We've seen it in
India.
Asian
In India,
subcontinent.
it was even before the Me Too movement. Actually, they had their own Me Too movement before it happened in the US.
In Africa, though, more broadly, do you see this gaining traction?
Yes, I've seen something in Senegal. There was on social media like an orange heart that was related to names on Twitter. And I've heard women in Senegal telling about sexual harassment in different areas of the society. So I think that every society has its own timing, its own timeline, and we don't need to have everything happening at the same time. But the Me Too movement is still something that has struck the world.
French journalist and author Rokhaya Diallo, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.